In this video, I'm going to draw this thing. We're going to be doing it digitally, and I'm going to do this on an iPad Pro in Procreate with the Apple Pencil 2. This is going to be a hangout sketching session. I'm going to draw and create this thing from start to finish in Procreate, and I'm going to use my really simple process that I use for line and color. So just a couple of brushes, a couple of ideas, really basic digital art process that I think anyone can really easily use. This iPad Pro is not the latest and greatest one, but it is new to me, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience using it and Procreate, because normally I'm working in Photoshop or on paper. As usual for a Drawing Codex video, this is not going to be fast-paced nor heavily edited. This is a real-time drawing tutorial. Think of it more like a drawing lesson. It's just going to be you and me hanging out. I'm just going to share with you how I would create a little kind of sketchy illustration style image, and we're just going to talk about the process and art and iPads, etc. And it's just like a hangout session. So hopefully that sounds good. Hopefully you'll join me. Let's jump in and get started. Alright, welcome to the Drawing Codex. My name is Mcburnie. I've been a professional working artist for over 20 years, and on this channel, we're all about drawing cool stuff from our imagination, embracing the challenge of drawing, and mastering the craft of line and color illustration. Now, if you'd like to learn more about line and color illustration, you can check out my free quick start guide. It's aimed to get you up and running quickly in Photoshop, developing your own simple, reliable line and color process and style. You'll get access to all of the brushes and Photoshop documents and tricks and tips that I use as I create the illustration in this guide. It's free. The link will be in the description, so go check that out if that's something you're interested in. All right, so tools for today are an iPad Pro. This is an M1 version. I have an Apple Pencil 2. This is the 1 terabyte version, so it has 16 gigs of RAM. Other than that, basically, we're just going to be using Procreate. And I actually, with this one, I did a few sketches. I wanted to just kind of get ahead of this a little bit and also look at, how it's very easy to just use these types of processes where you're sketching in one medium and then it's very easy to then go in and, transfer it to another. So I have a little sketchbook page that I was literally just doing this morning, trying to figure out like what haven't I drawn yet for a art ritual video. And yeah, I just sort of cropped out a little bit of this, and all I'm going to do now is just kind of resize it. So I'm just working with the basic frame that and proportion that we have with the iPad itself, right? Because I figure that kind of makes sense. And yeah, just gonna crop it there, and then can just reduce the opacity like way down. So all this does is it just gives me a little bit of a jump, right? A little thumbnail sketch gives me a little bit of a jump on what's happening. And I find that this is just a really sort of simple way to start. So in terms of the brushes that I'm using a slightly modified version of sort of the 6B pencil brush, and it's mainly, I think, just modified it doesn't taper quite as much, but basic Procreate brushes, nothing kind of fancy. And what I'm going to do initially, so typically with this type of process, what I'm trying to get happening is a kind of sketchy illustration-y thing. So I'm trying to essentially maximize what I can get done in maybe like an hour and a half to 2 hours. That's sort of my goal. So what I'm doing here is just taking that initial little thumbnail and I'm building a better version of it, let's say. And this is pretty light here. So what I'll do is I'll just sort of switch over to the version where you can sort of see the actual sort of feed of it, because this is probably a little bit better when we're just sort of starting out, right? And all I'm doing here is just blocking things in. So I'm trying to block in the basic mannequin of the figure and thinking about all of the typical Loomis stuff that I would normally talk about on the Drawing Codex channel. where I'm just thinking about building that mannequin, right? I've got the rib cage, right? Upper torso. I'm going to link that to, right, what we sort of got here. Some hips, right? Pelvic area. And yeah, I'm just basically building out a stick figure. And what this gives me is the proportion, right? So I can kind of check like, yeah, how's this kind of going? And I think this is where, yeah, probably what I'll do is just kind of copy what was there in that thumbnail. It's important with thumbnails not to get too attached to them, because I think it's often with thumbnails, yeah, they're not actually that good. They don't really give us that much information. Like they do the basic job of saying, hey, here's what's here, here's what's there. You know, and it avoids me having to, you know, do a lot of fussing around. But after that, I think it's really important to start to get going with your actual sort of illustration. So I think actually this pelvis is kind of turned a little bit. And so we're probably going to see that leg somewhere down there, but I'm not trying to get too much into that right now. Oh, so I think that the thing that I was thinking of that I kind of haven't drawn a lot of is kind of like fairy stuff, but I really like to take a little bit of a darker sort of look of it, a little bit more of a concept designy kind of vibe. And I'm going to sort of lean into the sort of bug, the more sort of underground, like earthy, sort of dark fairy tale version of it. So going to have make it feel a little bit sort of creepy. Not too much, but just a little bit. So I'm just sort of working with figure here, but that is sort of what I have in mind. So we sort of have a character who's flying, right? If we go back and look at this, what we sort of had here. Oh, let's bring that up to the top. I'm going to turn it on so that you can kind of see. I kind of have this idea for some type of fairy creature with a lot of wings, and I want to sort of enhance the insect look a little bit, right? Make it feel a little bit creepy. And so I kind of did just a quick version of what the character would look like, as just like T-pose almost, from a character design standpoint. And that gives us a really simple way to just view what the costume is going to be. But as I said, just blocking in these initial proportions, right? I've got the torso, right? I'm bringing that down. I've got the pelvic area, right? Pelvic bone, and then thinking about how that's going to connect to these muscles, right? Same thing here. Right. And yeah, blocking in some of the primary forms. Again, there's a million ways, as I'm often saying, that you can work these ideas, get this kind of stuff happening. And the way that I would use the pencil is a little bit different in Procreate. I find that like every digital software program, every pencil, every combination of the pencil and the paper has a different way that it tends to work, right? And yeah, I find that Procreate, works in a very, very kind of particular way. So I'm drawing pretty lightly. If we sort of go back to where are we? Over the top there, you can see, I'm just sort of scumbling around over it, right? You can see I'm not really pressing hard, just kind of messing around a little bit. And
I'm not going to worry too much about all of these back muscles because I know that, yeah, most of these are going to get covered by other things. But, you know, it's worth putting some of that muscle in there. It's not going to hurt. Often in terms of putting anatomy in there like that, you know, what I found is that the more I learn of anatomy, and still have a lot to go in terms of, you know, certainly mastering it or getting to some, you know, degree of mastery. I've mostly been focused on drawing people and characters and not really going into medical style anatomy. But the more you can understand where the muscles go, the easier it is to just sort of put stuff in there. In the beginning, you might want to skip areas that you know don't need to have really, you know, detailed anatomy figured out. If you know it's going to be covered up, then, you know, sort of don't worry about putting it in there. But you know, as you get more knowledge, it's just like, well, I will just put that in there, right? So anyway, this fairy is looking pretty buff, which is like a lot more sort of muscular. And that is the other problem with putting in anatomy, is things tend to, you know, get out of hand, right? You tend to draw muscles because you can. But I do like the idea of having some mass here because there are all of these wings sort of attached. So I've got sort of two sets of these small wings. And I'm just drawing through, making sure that, and I'm not going to go over this again and do finished lines. I'm just going to sort of erase and mess around with the lines that are here. But still, I think it's a good idea to draw through. So again, two sets of these big wings. And probably I'll end up again not making this a full-on concept design exercise where we can switch to a razor. It's got a softer razor. Yeah, not going to make it some epic concept design challenge where I figure out how all of these wings kind of connect to the form. But I think it is good to maybe, you know, think about where they might connect and, you know, maybe put some sort of musculature or mass there. Right. So I think this wing here is meant to be underneath. So that one goes there. And then I have one here. Right, that's kind of coming up here. And I think I need to crop out a little bit on this. But we'll do that after I've transferred the sketch. All right. Boom. So this is very similar to, you know, a lot of the other things I normally draw on here. Just, you know, slightly different feel. And I wanted to do something with a bit more of a pose. All right, so almost at a point where I feel like we don't need this sketch that I've got anymore. I've probably gotten most out of it. But I did have this idea to kind of have some little bugs kind of on her, right? Like sort of bug friends. And some kind of flying around. Over here. Again, don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. Just felt like a cool idea. All right, so this one, oh, I'm going to regret doing this, drawing the underside of a bug. Then I'm going to have to, well, we'll see whether I do need to actually figure out what's going on there. No, I think it's going around. It's sort of going this way. All right, and then, yeah, see if we can get these wings away from this as a tangent. Boom. Yeah. So this is where I do find it is kind of handy to try and do some kind of little T-pose character here, right? So I've got this, right? Kind of zoom up and you can kind of see what I had in mind, and this just reminds me, it's so easy, I find, when we're kind of at this phase, and yeah, it's really easy, I find, to just kind of get a little bit lazy and do kind of what works with the pose, and I think we just tend to get sort of slightly less interesting results. So I think trying to, again, add a little bit more of a costume that I'm thinking of, it just makes me think more, right? Well, and yeah, the whole point is to make it sort of feel as if it's flowing. So again, we're going to have some flowiness here. So again, doing a lot of drawing through, which you know, is super challenging in the beginning if you're not used to it. Right, so we've got a little bug guy here, little bug guy here. We could probably have a few more around the place. Where's this guy coming? Maybe also sort of coming this way. Will I have to go look at some bug reference? Probably. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I might be able to get away with it. We'll see. Because yeah, I'm just making this up. And yeah, a lot of that is, you know, just basic visual library. So I know that insects have 3 bits, right? An insect, you know, kind of has this sort of, I think it's a thorax, it's got a head, it's got an abdomen, that the legs are normally coming out of the bit in the middle, right? The wings are normally going to come out of the bit in the middle. You know, so even when you have a different type of insect, you know, it tends to have that general anatomy. Yeah, you know, but just making stuff up. All right, so let's try get rid of this and see what we have. Boom. Oh. Yeah, I think that kind of works. So yeah, that's like the first stage. What are we at? We are kind of like 15 minutes in, and really this stage, this first stage, is just about transferring the thumbnail or building a thumbnail, getting a sketch in there and kind of seeing, look, you know, does this work? I feel like we either need to go further in, right? Like crop it further in or crop it further out. I mean, I do feel like cropping it in is probably might actually be better. The question is, what happens to this leg? So often the other thing I often will do is if I am at that kind of juncture, you know, I'm sitting there looking at it going, hey, does this work? Does this work? Right? Let's just duplicate this layer. All right, just duplicate. And then I'm just going to hide the one underneath. And now switch to eraser. Right, let's erase this. Yep, and let's just see if I can put this foot down here. And kind of make sure it's not too close to the edge. So yeah, let's see how we're going up here. So I'm still perfecting my photographing the iPad. It is a little bit of a challenge in terms of getting the balance of brightness right on the screen, especially in the beginning. So yeah, let me know how that's going on your end, whether you can kind of see it well enough. All right, so I feel like we're kind of there. So probably what I need is a couple of things, right? A couple of basic things at this stage. What I'm going to do is soften it all down and then basically start the drawing. But I think it would be good and sensible to have at least these bugs here, right, on a separate layer, which is kind of annoying because I was trying to keep things really simple, but I think that's going to be the best thing. So what I'm going to do is do that, and then I'm also going to just go and check because I have some bug reference that I can just easily get. So I'll just grab that quickly and sort of show you how I would do that. Yeah, we'll sort of keep going at the next stage. All right, so I have some bug reference here, and you can just see this is all I've got. It's just some very simple reference. These are actually done for a drawing sort of lesson, right, where I remember people had to draw different sort of insects as part of a form drawing exercise, and I just kind of had them, and I was like, So all we kind of really need is to look at, for me, and this is a completely different beetle, but what I'm really after is this information here. What happens, let's see if we can get a little bit closer. Yeah, right. So the key thing is like, what happens underneath the beetle, right? Like how do those legs connect? And I find actually sort of doing this on, like, using a phone like this, if you have a sketchbook, is actually a really good way, because I can just kind of put this, over here, so I can kind of see it. And now it's like a lot easier for me to, actually go around and kind of play with that, right? But I think, again, before I sort of dive too much into that, I think what I'll do is we'll just get the select bit. Let's go freehand, clear, right? I'll just see if I can grab this guy and, let's just copy paste that. Then we'll go here. Grab this one. Boom. Copy paste. Yeah, and so now I've sort of got them on a separate layer, and yeah, all I'm going to do is just go through, and exactly the same process that I would use with the kneadable eraser. What I'm going to do is just go through. All right, let's merge those just for now. Yeah, so just the same as I would with a kneadable eraser with a sketchbook, I'm just going to go through, and I'm going to do this manually. This may seem like a bit antiquated, but I find often this is like a really good way to just get a bit more control, because there are some areas here where maybe I have drawn through and I want to erase that a little bit more. And there are some areas where I have not drawn through, or maybe that line is like actually, like, maybe even though it's sketchy, right? I might want to use that. So I feel like just doing it manually is a little bit better. Now these lines are going to be sketchy, right? This is going to be a pretty sort of messy set of lines, but I think that's fine. Right, and here again, we want to get rid of these entirely because we're going to want a separate layer. Boom. Yeah. It's a very simple process. And one of the things that I like to do, and why I'm always talking about, a lot of the courses that I run, like the Line and Color Academy, are based around simple, reliable processes. That's like the whole point. And the reason for that is that it just literally makes your life a lot easier, a lot simpler. And one of the aspects of that I found really useful is to have like similar processes that will kind of work digitally and also traditionally. It's one of the reasons why I have never really used too much of the warp tool or the move tool, etc. I use it quite a bit, but I've tried to not make it like a major part of the process because I want the way that I draw and tweak and the process that I use to be similar from sketchbook to, the digital work that I do. Because I found that over the years that means you have sort of less resistance switching between them. Yeah, so you see here I've got over here, I've got quite a few little mushy, sketchy marks that have been put in. Let's just get rid of all of those, right? We've got some of that stuff that was drawn through. Let's get rid of that. All right, we've got a lot of construction over here on this face. Let's get rid of that. And yeah, just see how we go. Now, the lines are still there. They're kind of faint. Cool. All right. And yeah, all I'm going to do is just go back and keep drawing. So now that I kind of have and let's just quickly do the same for this. Now that I kind of have these, now that I kind of have the proportions sorted, I think it's a lot easier for me to zoom up. One of the biggest challenges with using a small screen like this, so I'll talk a little bit about the iPad itself, because there's a bit of story behind it. Because I did a iPad versus Wacom video on the channel, and it's interesting sort of the feedback that people gave me, because I kind of didn't feel like the iPad was really there, but I know that a lot of professionals use it, so it's just one of those things where I was just kind of sharing my opinion. But yeah, I thought it would be good to try and get a little bit more into these because I think they have come a long way. But my old iPad died. It got a crack in the screen, and then it completely sort of disintegrated. And I was waiting for the M3 iPad to come so I could get that, but it just did not come. And so I was like, okay, I'll just get one of these, which is literally the worst time to buy an iPad right now because the M3 iPad is going to come out soon. I think it's going to be significantly better. So I just got a secondhand one, and I think it's actually a really good sort of thing to play around with potentially, as an artist, is to just look at some of those options. And I've never actually had a Pro small one, and I wanted to sort of check that out as well. Because I know a lot of people, certainly in the comments of the video that I made on sort of iPad versus Wacom, were talking about how, they actually like the small Wacom because the small iPad. Because I think a big contention of mine was bigger is better, right? Bigger is better. And I kind of think that is still true, but I wanted to try. So I got a small iPad Pro. And also a lot of people were saying, it's not fair because the iPad, the 1 terabyte version of the iPad has 16 gigs of RAM, so it's a little bit faster. So there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? Oh yeah, I'm drawing on as usual, drawing on the wrong layer. So yeah, just select this. So anyway, there's a bunch of reasons why I decided to get this. Let's go cut, and then let's go paste. See if that's gonna, let's put it. So anyway, I'm a little bit slower in Procreate than in Photoshop. But yeah, so it's interesting though, because I actually sort of started drawing on very, very small screens, right? Let's pinch those. Are they going to work? Yeah, there we are. Because obviously in the beginning, digital art was really small. And what I find is that when you are working digitally and you are working on really sort of small screens, it's much more important to use these types of processes where we start small, you kind of block everything in, and then progressively, right, we sort of get bigger and bigger, and you can sort of zoom in. Because the real danger with a small screen is you kind of can't see the drawing that you're doing all at once, right? So if I'm zoomed in, I obviously can't see the rest. So it's really important to So again, I thought maybe some like sort of big crazy eyes, a little bit more buggy, might be cool. But yeah, so what we would often do a lot in the sort of earlier days of digital art is a lot of this kind of drawing really small thumbnails and then blowing it up, and because you'd be sort of zoomed in here and you couldn't see anything. And I think it's very much the same if you're working on a small iPad. But I do find that this thing is pretty fast. Like so it's not an M2 iPad, but compared to the old one, it is a significantly faster, and it does actually load up some stuff that the previous iPad I had that was sort of the model before this did not work. As in like PSD files that I had from like comic book pages and stuff that I would always be like, oh, I wonder whether this would work. And basically the iPad just can't handle it, right? It's just too slow. So it doesn't even open it. It just crashes. Boom. Boom. So again, I think I've got like, there is a little sort of bug here. But I'm just gonna suggest it, just sort of hint at it. Yeah, boom. So if you look at what we can sort of see here, yeah, you can see I'm still just kind of picking away at it, being pretty tentative with the way that I'm drawing, but I'm still allowing myself to draw through. So I kind of had the idea that maybe there would be some sort of horns or something like this. Because again, insects do have horns. But yeah, really important to get that draw through stuff sorted. Be comfortable, right? Like letting the lines flow where they need to, being confident that you can figure it out later. Right. Just pushing that back. So again, same process exactly that I would use when I was drawing traditionally. Going back and forwards. With a razor pencil, just kind of refining things. And, at the end I'll be going through and, doing another one of those kind of erasing passes. So yeah, I'll do a review. I'm not sure whether it's really worth doing a review of like an older sort of iPad, but I'll do some type of video where I'm sort of looking at this as a digital art tool. Boom. All right. So again, also, I'm kind of warming up. This is the first drawing of the day for me. All right, let's see if we can go closer. So I feel like that is no longer. So yeah, gonna try and speed up and warm up, get a little bit looser, so we can get this happening. And I think I'll have to play a lot with the color, right? Like making her look a little bit more insectish. Oh. Not sure exactly how that's all going to happen. All right. So again, it's worthwhile, potentially putting some bits of clothing and stuff in front of. Right, let's kind of zoom out. Think about where this major wing is going to be here. Boom. And then what we're going to have, I think it would be good to put a bit of cloth or something here just to kind of obfuscate what's happening with the wings a little bit. We'll see whether that works. It might be a bit on the nose, I don't know. A bit obvious. The other thing I could obviously do is look at some insect wing reference. But I'm not sure whether I want to go that far with that. It might be cool to keep them really shape-based. Right. Boom. Yeah, cool. So I've got that. Let's hide that for now. All right, and we've got this one here. Got this bit of cloth here. And this thing here. Boom. Boom. So I've got a hip bone here. Going down there. Again, I'll put some cool patterns or something like that on this if we get a chance. For now, just going to keep everything super basic. So it is tricky drawing on the screen. It is a bit rubbery. I think that was another one of those issues people had because I feel like the Wacom pencil or pen is like a little bit better than the Apple one, but a lot of people really like this Apple one. And I just don't feel it's as accurate. And a lot of people said, well, you need to get the screen protectors and stuff like that. Yeah, I tried doing that. Did not like them. So it's just rubbery. Like rubbery is fine. It's not that it's rubbery. It's just that it's not as accurate, right? That's my point. That's my problem. All right, so we got this wing here, and this one is coming up. All right, somewhere there, like boom. So yeah, I'm staying pretty right. I'm still staying pretty light with these. You can see I've got a long way I can go to push really sort of dark lines, right? So it's important to understand that that's sort of part of the plan I'm having, right? I am going pretty soft with this, but that's kind of often what you need to do. All right. But I mean, I think like the Apple Pencil is good. It does work. It is decent. But yeah, trying to suggest as much as possible. Right. Yeah, not sure what's happening with this bit of cloth here. Right, got this going here. If we go back to the head top, you can see that. Yeah, this one's just a little bit blown out. But yeah, so we'll create some interesting, try and make some sort of fake drapery, I guess. Right, as in just sort of, iconic, sort of representational marks. Suggesting that there is some drapery there. Yeah, I was sort of thinking of this as like kind of a, where are we? Yeah, sort of like almost like a detached sleeve thing. And maybe we could kind of attach it somehow. Sort of over here. But yeah, not quite sure about that yet. I'll play around with that. All right, I think we had a little bug over here. But yeah, no, let's get rid of that. Come on. Yeah, and the other thing is that, like the switching, the double taps, all that stuff on, iPad and a lot of these other tablets it kind of works well, but there's a certain degree to where, look, you just kind of want a proper button that actually works. It's actually sort of designed to be there, right? Okay. Yeah, it's probably a better view of it. So let me know, like, let me know in the comments down below which one of these views is sort of better. Because yeah, I'm trying to really make sure that the ability to kind of get like the right shot of some of these digital tools is kind of working. Because even though I think that, I mean, I think the most important thing is being able to see the pencil, right? Because then you get to understand the difference between the way that the hand is moving versus the stroke that gets made, and you can see all those things. But it is hard to get really accurate sort of colors, which is super annoying. So it's hard to actually see the proper thing that I'm seeing on the screen. Obviously. All right. So again, I'll come refine this stuff as we go. Well, let's break that. Have to come clean that up later, maybe. Maybe. All right. And the idea is this is a bit see-through, like some of this fabric or sort of all of this fabric. Here we've got a hand here. What are we going to do with this? I'm not sure yet. I'll play around with it later. Yeah, I feel like often it's just I feel like it's a good idea to get it all sorted. So yeah, the interesting thing about those kind of bugs was just like where the little legs were kind of coming from, and they sort of come from the center there. So it is not. I'm not necessarily going to get like a really great representation of that, but I should be able to not do something that's completely wrong, which is often all we need with sort of reference and visual library when we're dealing with cartooniness. You know, something sort of simplified like this. Put in some kind of cool looking horns or something. Again, this guy here, same thing. Right, draw the center line. So this is, you know, basic form drawing, right? We've got one mass, right, for the, is it the abdomen? The back? I forget. I better not try and just make up insect anatomy. We got the bit in the middle, right? Got a bit at the back. We find center. They're all sort of jelly beans, essentially. Then we got the head, right? Right, like where's that other one? Oh, we're probably not going to see it that much. Then do we have some antennae over there? And then, again, I would imagine most insects are sort of tucking in their legs, but sort of pretend that this guy's not, and yeah, put some little marks and things. Again, none of this is real beetle anatomy or anything. And have those kind of wing covers, and then yeah, this is all looking pretty, it's looking pretty amateurish to my eye. In terms of, that there probably are people. If you're one of these people in the comments, let me know if you're screaming at my terrible insect anatomy. But yeah, we're going to have this kind of wing covers. Then we're going to have some wings. Maybe they're just going to need to go off the screen. Who knows? Right. And then, yeah, some of these just have secondary wings. Or at least I imagine they do. Maybe that's another one of those sort of urban myth thingies. Maybe it's just the wing covers that we're sort of looking at. Anyway, it's kind of cool. Yeah, we could use sort of blur or something like that to really, change whether or not they look like they're moving. Yeah, I'll have to kind of look at that later, right? Again, this is often the challenge, is that we're dealing with you in the beginning, it's very easy to put a lot of focus into trying to find the form, like where is it, what's happening. But then what you actually want to do is sort of make it all blurry and vague. And I think that's one of the biggest kind of challenges you tend to find. Is that, yeah, like what are you trying to do? Yeah, anyway, probably need to stop fussing over that. It's probably fine. I should probably, one of the things you probably could do or should do is, maybe make it more clear that, this is like a fantasy thing. Put some more elements to these insects to make it clear that, they're really high fantasy insects. And that would make it clearer that, it's not meant to be any particular type of insect. Well, all right. And again, we could put a little bit of shading or something there. Make it look a little bit more interesting. All right, let's figure out this basic figure. It's mostly there. All right, we got this coming around. Boom. Yeah, cool. Put some shadow there. Boom. Yep. And yeah, probably running out of time to, spend ages on all these little bits and pieces. This is where, you need to think about, like, what is this image? Like, how much detail do we need in there? One of the advantages and things that I think is really sort of cool about, using an iPad or something like this is it does kind of allow you to play around with, like what a sketch means and what, like what you want to do. It allows you to, and I think this is one of the things that a lot of people sort of say is that, they want to have like a sketchbook, but you also want to add color. Now, how is that? Right, if I kind of look up here, right, I can kind of see, like, how is that leg the right length? I think it's probably going to be okay. Yeah. But I think in order to do that, you need to have a style and a process that's gonna work when it comes to stopping at some point, right? We need to figure out, like, where do we stop? What are we actually going to do? Right? That's not. Right, we've got heal. Right, ball of the foot. Similar kind of thing happening here. Right, this one we're seeing the outside. In this one we're going to see that kind of big toe. Oh. So a good way to get around that is to think about timing yourself, right? This is another thing that I think is a really useful task if you're dealing with, like, okay, how do I know when to stop? It's just kind of say, well, like, what's the best thing you could do in a particular amount of time? And that's often what I'm doing with these art ritual things. And especially if you're learning something new, I don't use iPad for this type of stuff that often, right? Like, where do you start and where do you stop, right? Like, what is important? So here, let's see if I can get those other ones back, because they're going to be important. Yeah, I still think I want to do it this way. Let's see if we can get this little guy's legs to be tucked up a bit. So you can see again, like, looking at reference, like, for me, I'm not, and I often say this, I'm not after some crazy degree of, realism or perfection with the reference, but, again, I'm trying to draw the little sort of bug guys, and really the thing that I'm trying to avoid is just embarrassing myself too much. Just like drawing stuff that's completely wrong. And that's where it's often helpful, right? Like which way do the legs go? Again, I don't need to get them all perfect, but if I can get them a little bit better than that, a little bit better than nothing, then that's a good thing. And often that stuff is about directionality, right? It's like, yeah, I'm just doing a little bug in the corner, but if I can get all the things going in the right direction, makes a big difference. Now, am I on the wrong? No, I think I'm still on the right layer, which is good. And that becomes increasingly important when, right, we're trying to just do like little things, right? So here, just got some little insect creature I'm trying to put up here. And the more that we, just figure out the basic form, the easier it is for me to, put something in that, looks half decent. All right. So I just need to draw these. Let's put this in. So sometimes I would like move the actual iPad around to get this happening, but because I locked it off, I kind of don't want to do that because of the camera. It's a little bit easy to kind of, use the zooming and rotation. Yeah, and probably just this side of it is one of the things that, really notice is a lot faster with kind of M1 iPad versus the kind of older ones. And certainly it feels like this, I think previously with the like sort of I think it would have been a 2018 iPad, something like that, maybe a little bit later. Yeah, if I was working at the kind of resolution that I like to work at, which is something, that will print 5,000 pixels by, 3,000, 6,000 by 4,000, like we want to have like the longest edge be, 5,000 to 10,000 pixels. That's kind of what I like to do because I find that then the art is actually high res and, it can actually kind of do stuff with it. Which is maybe excessive, but anyway, with the previous iPad, I could kind of have like 4 layers or something with that kind of resolution. Whereas this way, we're at more like sort of 50 or 60 layers. So it's totally viable to do. And one of the things that's sort of interesting about the iPad that I kind of noticed looking at it is like when you have a, when you have a 12-inch screen, right, that is like an LCD screen from the early 2000s or whatever, it's a real nightmare because working in Photoshop and zooming is a little bit of a challenge. But here, because you can kind of continually, sort of look at it, right? It's very easy to sort of say, I'm going to work up here, right? And then I'll zoom in, right? I can work out here. I'll zoom in. And that is, I think that is the reason it kind of works, right? Like that literally is why it's not complete misery. It's just because you can sort of zoom around, right? I can be like, I'm going to work on this bug, right? And it does make even the smaller size a lot more feasible, which is super interesting because I hadn't really sort of thought about that. But that obviously does also require that the processor itself is like fast enough to deal with that. And yeah, I think that's kind of, it's there, right? It kind of works. And I think once you get into that sort of frame of like zoom in, zoom out, yeah, it's not too bad. I don't hate it. All right. Oh yeah, I'm drawing on the wrong layer again. Good one. All right, here we go. All right. So with these guys, what I can do is like I can erase what is behind just for fun. Although we don't really need to do that. But yeah, all I'm gonna do, let's switch to here. All right, I'm gonna think about, right, like where's the overall shape? Got a jelly bean shape, right? I'm looking at it from below. Right, let's see if we can find the form. And then what I'm gonna basically do is sort of break it up into, right, let's find center into 3 kind of sections. Again, I'm just coming up with weird bug antlery things. I'm not really showing the mouth or any of that kind of stuff. I'm keeping it really simple. I think that it's going to make it have a little bit more appeal. Right. So again, I kind of got some legs like this. Boom. And then Yeah, not sure what's happening with these ones. Let's play around. Again, I'm totally making up weird bugs that don't exist, but this is, this is why drawing's fun, because I can. And this is often when we're dealing with this kind of sketchy, concepty style of imagery that I'm sort of playing around with here. If I was doing this for a video game or something like that, and the actual design of it was important, it's totally possible to, go through, and once you have the idea and everyone's like, oh yeah, that's a cool idea, let's go with these shapes or these antlers or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's totally possible to go back and actually figure out how that stuff works, and do all the anatomical legwork. Boom. All right, let's go here. We can actually see what we're doing. Boom. All right. And yeah, again, we can kind of zoom out and be like, is this helping? Does it even need to be there? Not quite sure. I mean, it might. Oh, nice. Yeah, let's see if we can select it and move it. Right, having it in a little bit might be better. Boom. All right, let's give that a shot. All right. So trying to find, again, just sketching around, and I'm going to try and find more or less the sort of outline here. All right. If we were to sort of transfer that over, all right, this is kind of where that wing is going to be, maybe. Again, just making it up. I feel like we could get a bit more sort of swoop on this character, sort of guy, to create a bit more drama, but I'm not sure how much time I've got. But I think what I need to do is put these down here. Right. All right. Probably way too much time drawing this silly bug here. That doesn't really need or deserve any of this. It's like a real candidate for just being cut. But often it is, those things, right? You kind of have to draw it and figure it out to kind of realize that it's just not working. It's just not meant to be. And mostly it's not because it's bad. It's just because it's not really needed for the composition. All right. So again, a lot of that drawing is not really sorted. Oh, comp. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, just being able to sort of zoom out, right? Sort of look at it. It's kind of cool. Yeah, I feel like this wing totally needs to be over there though. That did not work. Might have to do. It's because I'm not sure how it's going to work from a shape perspective to do anything else. All right, one more bug. One more bug. Let's erase here. Not going to need a lot of that. All right. Boom. Okay, so this one needs a little bit more. So, I mean, what I might do is, take another look at this kind of reference. Because again, one of the things I'm sort of skirting over a lot is, right, if we sort of go here, so you can sort of see here, like one of the things I'm kind of just mushing around and making nothing of is the different articulation points between these different sort of elements, right? And that's something that I really could and should sort of put more effort into, right? Like this sort of aspect here of what's going on. So that's something I might look at. So again, I'll put my reference there again, and that might help me. But again, the main key that I find is just that, yeah, we need to stick to super basic, simple reference gathering. Otherwise, it just becomes a whole game. All right, let's soften up this. So I'm still going to use the same technique, right? Essentially, we've sort of got, right, we sort of got one form here, and I think it's important to get that, right, get that jelly bean, right, the overall gesture of it kind of working, right, and find center there. All right, and then, right, we'll look at these different areas. Yeah. Yeah. So I think with this one we'll have to figure all that out. It's not going to let us just fake it. But again, this is like, so a lot of what I talk about on the channel, and again, in all the courses that I run, is the idea of like learning to draw while we're drawing fun things. And I think this is like exactly what I mean here. So I'm drawing something that is, it's like an illustration. I'm just kind of playing around, but I'm also improving my structural drawing ability, right? I've got a little opportunity here to be like, oh, okay, let's see if we can figure out how to draw a better bug. And it's this kind of thought process that I think, this is what makes the difference in the end. All right, so we got legs here. All right, same idea. We're going to skeleton out, all right, the sticks. All right, so think about, right, here's center. So yeah, structural drawing. All right, where are all these sticks going? All right, let's find this over here. Boom. And all right, so what we're dealing with there is we have this little connection point for the legs. All right, let's go over here where we can actually see. All right, we have another connection point on the sort of midpoint of the insect. And then the front legs are kind of connected here. All right, so I can essentially line a lot of this stuff up. Yeah, and I'm just doing basic structural drawing. And the more I kind of understand the form, the more I kind of understand, you know, what's going on, the more I can, you know, be a little bit more gestural, make the drawing, you know, suck a little bit less. But this is essentially how I think most of my sort of drawing knowledge occurred. It's just literally me with a construction phase, and often, you know, working in a bit more of a concept arty sort of sketchy style, where you do get to experiment, right? You know, I get to think about, okay, how's this constructed? Let's see if we can add a bit extra here. Well, all right. Yeah, so just constantly having that construction phase where you can push visual library, you know, you can get out the reference, you can get out the anatomy book if you're not sure on the anatomy, you can play with it. And, you know, by the time I finished this illustration, I've probably drawn like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bugs, 9 bugs, right? You know, and I feel like this is just way more fun than doing studies, you know. And by the time I kind of get to the end of it, I'll have like a, you know, a bunch of ideas for how I want to work a lot of these things. So again, not sure what we're doing exactly with these legs, but probably we can just do the same with these front legs, although they're a little bit different. And we got a whole bunch of these, you know, overlapping shapes, but let's see if we can construct that properly. Think about where the center is. Right. But yeah, I've got some, like, I feel like the kind of pattern is working here. But still, just totally kind of messing around, right? Okay. Here is that head. All right, so what's going on? We got center line here, right? I'm going to sort of try and represent some kind of, if there is like a mandible, right? I'm going to carve it out of the circle. And here we're going to have some wings. Boom. Boom. And yeah, look, I mean, it's not high art, guys. Let's get rid of this. And yeah, it needs a little bit of cleaning up. If we make the size of this a little bit smaller, let's go through. Let's clean this one up. This is going to be in the foreground. If I get a lot of the detail here right, a lot of the other stuff will kind of take care of itself. And this is also something, it's kind of why I drew it last, is that, and I'll go back and tweak some of those other ones. All right, it's kind of, oh man, that's so annoying. Kind of why it's worthwhile doing it last. Okay, let's see if we can think about how we might make this feel a bit more like this thing is flying. I don't think that's going to work, but it's all we got. Okay. So we got these kind of 4 legs here. And if I get these working, it's actually going to sort out a lot of this other stuff too. Right, got my silhouette sorted. Boom, boom. Anyway, we'll see what this looks like in color. I have no idea what we're dealing with as of yet. Boom. Yeah, so if we go here, you see the same kind of thing, but with the hand. You can see I'm just trying to go through, right, plus these things. I'm often just doing little kind of abstract marks, right, trying to fill this up, because I don't want it to draw too much contrast, right? One of the things with lines, right, we have the hierarchy of contrast, hierarchy of detail. So this guy is not going to have that much detail on him, right? It's kind of zooming past. Yeah. Just kind of making it a bit messy. That's a long way to go for a very average drawing like that, I think. But I think it'll add a little bit to what we got. Now, I also think that this, now that I'm kind of, spending all that time futzing around with it, let's move it just a little bit away so it's not quite interfering with all the other stuff I've got. And now that we've got that out of the way, can draw this. Boom. Boom. All right, what's happening with that hand? Do I have to? I think I have to figure it out. I think I have to go and do it. So she's kind of looking like, she's like sort of this way. Have the thumb there. Can do the classic indexed finger here. Something like that. Got these fingers there. Yeah, I mean, it's not that original, but maybe a little bit smaller. So you can't do this traditionally, but I think a little bit of this is okay. All right. Now, the other thing that as a stylistic thing that I find I often do that I have to watch is frequently I kind of make the forearm a little bit long. So let's just see if we can play around with that. But essentially, right, like at some point you have to call these kind of drawings done, right? This is just like a sketchy kind of, it's sort of like practicey, illustration-y thing. It's the best I can do in 2 hours or something like that, or 3 hours or something in that sort of frame. All right. And yeah, sometimes it's just, it's got to be like the best you can do. So we can't really see her arm on the other side, but I'm still going to sort of indicate where it's going, just because I think behind here, probably not over there, probably not close to here, but right, just a little bit. Yeah, I think that'll just help a tiny bit. And here we have the idea of this spear. It's kind of coming out. So I like the idea of it kind of also mirroring some of these ideas we've got. Right? I want it to look and feel a bit insecty. Oh. So again, just suggesting, just playing around. Oh. And the more I kind of, delve into this visual design language, right, of sort of insect fairy stuff, the better I would essentially get at, being able to really go in there and tweak things and, design cooler bits and pieces. It's still pretty basic at this stage. I think that, the main thing I'm noticing here is just really want to, like, this just seems way too basic. Well, and again, these. Let's see if we can add. Right, firstly, let's make this head a little bit smaller. Let's see if we can add a bit of that. Let's go running into bad tangents. But that's right. And yeah, just want this to have a little bit more structure. Although this is still not. Still, again, need some better reference for that as well. All right. Zoom out. Is that any good? Is that too close? To me, it is kind of too close. Let's see if we can. So yeah, probably now the kind of erasing I'm going to be doing is a lot smaller, right? We're going to be zooming in, and this is where you can basically choose to clean this up as much as you want. I can add a little bit more contrast. I can push things here and there, or we can just kind of leave it, right? Totally depends. Yeah, starting to work. So again, I'm going to leave some of the this tonality and stuff that's kind of gotten here through working on that anatomy. But let's get rid of this because that wasn't a real thing. Oh. But yeah, here we kind of had a bit of this. All right, and this little creature here, I feel like now that I've done some of that other work, I feel like there's probably some cool ways we could, keep one of these in. But have it not quite take up the same room. Again, let's see if we can tone this down. This is what I do, if I had more time, right? You could easily put another hour into, just going and cleaning everything up, making it feel a little bit nicer. I could that insect is still not really working. But yeah, you could clean up the lines a lot more. You can clean them up a lot less. It's really just a matter of, what you want to do. Yeah, so I still think that'll be right. But yeah, we could certainly add a little bit more tonality to things, right? Add a bit of shading. And this is another good opportunity to, sort of duplicate the layer, right? We sort of got things to a certain point. But, I do want to look at how we might, because again, the idea is the wings are going to be kind of see-through. So we can play around with this a bit. Now, this is, again, why illustration is kind of fun, right? We can sort of do a bit of, right? We can do a bit of everything. Again, I can make these wings feel maybe as if they're like vibrating a little bit. be tricky to know how to, put the color underneath there, but right, I think that's something that can kind of work. Right. And yeah, let's just put another reason for working on the hair over here is to just put a little bit more focus on the face. And the same thing with the horns, right? I don't necessarily think these need any extra sort of detail, but if I can kind of pull, if I can pull some extra stuff here, that'll kind of help. All right. Boom. So I feel like this is like a bit harsh here. Again, you probably wouldn't have quite so much of that either, right? We could probably get rid of that. But yeah, anyway, I think that's probably like good enough for now. If we kind of look at it over here, we can see it a little bit better. Yeah, it's kind of working. What we need to do next is add some color. All right, so the process I'm going to use is really, really simple. It's going to be very similar to what I have in my quick start guide. If you want to sort of figure out how I do this stuff in Photoshop, again, at some point I'm going to update that and make sure it kind of covers more than Photoshop, so we can sort of look at how the basic same process that I'm using for, most of that quick start guide and all the sort of courses I do is essentially cross-platform, because I think one of the best things you can do is to really think about simple processes that are reliable, that don't really need to change that much when you're switching software. So I will sort of get that sorted at some point, but for now, again, this is basically the same thing. What we're going to do is think first about what the color should be and what colors should be there. And this is also something that you can check out on the channel. I have a lot of videos talking about simple, reliable color processes and theory. So I actually had a few notes here that I kind of made on the sketch that were there to kind of remind me, right? So I kind of had this idea of it being like a moth, right? This insect vibe. So it's not, and I wanted that to be kind of browns and grays. And what this means is it shifts it a little bit more into a tonal image versus a color-centric image, because there's not a lot of bright color. I'm not making this a fluoro yellow sort of insect vibe, right? And what that means is we're a little bit more in the tonal range of art theory. So I'm going to need to use contrast. And as opposed to a lot of color contrast, we're going to use value contrast and sort of more temperature contrast. So what I'm going to do is start this flattening process, because I'm not going to use any of the selections. I'm just going to use a simple brush, and I'm going to think about simple color theory, which is, let's make the background bluer. All right, so I've got that kind of happening here. And yeah, what I'm going to do is make a layer above this kind of flat background layer, essentially. So I've still got these ones in the background, but I'm just kind of creating a new sort of series of images above there. So I've still got the lines here for the bug, and this is the lines for the character. And what I'm going to do is I've picked a inking brush. I think this is the syrup one. And what I'm doing is this is not the final color I think I'm going to use, but I'm going to use this to flat it and see how this works. And this is going to work because, see if we can go up a little bit closer. This is going to work, hopefully, because it's going to sort of show me when I'm going outside the line. So if I go outside the lines, you can see, right, I'm going to start to see like, oops. And that's because when we've got a light shape on a dark shape, you're going to tend to want to go inside the lines a little bit. And so all I'm going to do is, sort of go through the image and essentially do this. And I'm probably going to, because the whole character is, I think, going to be lighter versus the background. But we'll see. We'll adjust, right? So I'm just doing, this is how, one of the reasons I often develop much more complicated ways of doing this in Photoshop using complicated selection tools is it saves us some time here, right? This is pretty boring, but it's not the worst, right? There's worse things that you could spend your time doing. But yeah, that's all I'm doing, going through. And I could probably make this, right, a little bit smaller. That might allow me to create better shapes. And you can see I'm going over in some places. But that's all right. Boom. Yep. And, if we sort of fill those in, that's what we're going to get. Yeah, so it's just a matter of continuing to go through that, right? This is what we're sort of looking at in Photoshop. Sorry, in Procreate. A little bit more directly. Although to me, the colors look a little bit more dull on screen, on my screen. Oh. And yeah, it's pretty easy to do this while you're zoomed up. And yeah, once you kind of get used to using a particular brush for this, again, I don't think I've ever used this particular brush for doing this, but you kind of get a feel for how to do it quickly. And it can be good to have a brush that goes sort of thick and thin, because then, if you do need to just do the toe or something like that, you can just sort of do that. Right. Pretty simple. So again, this guy. And in many cases, like I think a lot of these are just going to be super flat colors. Okay, so we can see again, this needs to be. So obviously, if you spend more time cleaning up the lines, you spend more time doing this, you're going to get a much more polished result. And I think like one of the things that I do find is that having a few more of those tools to speed things up in Photoshop does mean that overall I'm able to get to a much more polished look in Photoshop quicker, because even though this is pretty simple, it does take time, and all of these things end up kind of sucking up your time, and also just the ability to use sort of more layers, more and to leverage the layers a little bit more means that for me, certainly still, like Photoshop is a lot faster to get a more sort of polished result. And that's because Procreate and these apps that work on the tablets and stuff are very optimized for using the pencil, right? They're very good for using the tool. So, if you're just kind of painting, it's pretty good. But I find like because the layers palette is so hidden, it's hard to see it all and mess around with it. Like it's not that hard, but it's a bit slow. Is that if you're doing a lot of messing around, clicking different layers, and I especially find this using like Clip Studio on a tablet or something, it's just so much slower because you don't have the keyboard shortcuts, and often that does make a difference. Just all that clicking means that you kind of just spend a little bit more time messing around, and it's harder to sort of squeeze out a little bit more polish easily within a certain amount of time. Or at least you kind of find different ways of doing it, I guess. But yeah, the selection tools in Photoshop really allow me to make sure that like you can really get in there and make sure that these flats using selections just go sort of pixel perfect, and you have so much control over like the blurring and making everything just a little bit more polished, more filters, more tricks that you can use. Yeah. But again, let me know in the comments down below whether that tracks for you. I mean, I think if you're not used to that speed, or using keyboard shortcuts for everything, and you're not seeing the the difference that can make, then yeah, it might not matter. Or if you have like a really simple process, right? It's just very drawing based. You're not trying to create multiple scenes, multiple layers all the time. Then yeah, I think it could be, much of a muchness. But we'll see. I'll play around with it some more. See if I can get it to go faster. Boom, boom. But yeah, this is like watching paint dry, right? It's like pretty boring, so I do apologize. But it does work, like I think Procreate has come a long way in that regard. Oh. Right. Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to see what's going on in some of these, like when we're sort of zoomed up like that. Where is it escaping? So if you can't figure out where it's escaping, it's worthwhile just making, I mean, that's obviously where it was escaping. Yeah, just kind of cut stuff off. See if you can get it to, see if you can kind of figure it out. And it'll take you a while. Like if you haven't used this type of process a lot, it'll take you a while, as with all processes, to figure out like how clean do I need to go with the lines? How clean do I need to go here with this flatting process? Right? Like what do I need to do to get that sort of polish in the end? Because once we add a few sort of effects and things on the top, then a lot of this will maybe not matter, right? If I'm not 100% accurate here. Well, and doing this for an illustration is fine. If it's a big illustration, you got time, it's fine. It's not like if you're doing a cover, right? You can spend an hour doing this, because the cover's going to take you many hours. And if it's just a simple image like this, or a character design or something where we're just, cutting out a few bits and pieces, it's, I feel like doing it by hand is okay. It's mainly when I'm doing comic book pages where I really needed a more automated way to do this with selections, to get the accuracy right, and also to make sure it doesn't take up a whole day of my week just doing this, because it is super, super boring to do heaps and heaps of this. All right. Almost there. And then it'll start to come together. Oh. And this is like definitely one of those parts of the process that you would see sped up. And normally the reason I do a lot of the selection wizardry in Photoshop when I'm doing tutorials is to make it go faster, right? Because this is literally like watching paint dry. This is not good YouTube content. But it is important if you're doing it and you're not. I feel like often, like for instance, if you were needing to spend 1 or 2 hours doing this really cleanly for a really highly polished illustration, it is important to know like how long it takes, and that yes, it is kind of boring, and that yes, like that's fine. That's kind of how it works, right? Because art does take a long time. And there are often little processes like this where if you are aiming for a really high level of polish, you need to get all these lines right. You need to spend the time to get all of this fully sorted, all dialed in. If you don't, then yeah, it's not going to work. And if you're rushing because you think everything's on a speed painting style of pace, then yeah, that can become super frustrating. So I think again, we've been spending about 10-15 minutes doing this so far. It feels like I've been spending an hour doing it already. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. But again, it's good to get this. And it's good to do this with some sort of thick to thin brush, right? Because if you do have these little bits, like these little pointy bits, but you've got like more of a round brush, it can be very hard to kind of, you constantly have to go in there and change the brush size to get in there. So a thick to thin brush for flatting, I think is a good idea. Boom. All right. What else have we got? Got a couple more these little bugs. And if I was in Photoshop again, I'd put all the bugs on separate layers. I might even put different elements of the character on different layers, just because different layers are easy. But yeah, I do want to. I'm not going to really work out the color here, right? I am just going to leave it as like a pretty simple, basic, flat color style here. And the reason for that is that I think often it's really important to understand that most of the wow factor is going to come through the drawing of most things that you do. And it's really important not to get too overwhelmed by all the possibilities and things you can do with styles, all that stuff I was sort of talking about in Photoshop. The fundamental key to line and color is just do some lines and put color underneath, and then the drawing kind of comes to life, right? It's a little bit magical how simple that can be, but what you can do, again, if you get the drawing right and the color right. So I think the more you can practice that way, the better. And if you get good at just doing, sort of little 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour little kind of images like this, it makes a big difference. All right, let's make something a little bit darker just for clarity. And then I'm gonna, let's, how do I, yeah, alpha lock that. Let's put in, so that's that line work. Let's put in a new one here. Now we're gonna do, and I'm really just doing this for clarity. So yeah, many different ways you could do this, but I'm just gonna, kind of flat the main bit of it. Right, get that happening. Right, so let's get that, and then what I can do is just add all these extra little bits. Boom. Boom. Yeah. There we go. So this is looking a bit ragged, but and most of this is, yeah, I'm just kind of getting sick of it. I'm like, it'll probably be okay. But I do think that probably this, like this one is the one I should have done in the beginning. Oh, low battery. Might have to take a break in a minute. Yeah, I probably should have done this in the beginning. The insect in the foreground, because it's going to boom, it is going to probably need to be pretty clear, right? If there's sort of wobbliness over here, I reckon we will notice it, but we'll see. Let's see how that goes. You can always erase a little bit here or there, or add some or whatever. It's not the end of the world. All right, we got that one. Let's do this guy. Boom. Boom, boom. So again, just do the main body. And often just doing that makes it a little bit clearer, because you can, like, one of the things with flatting is it does get a little bit confusing, and I think often anything that slows you down is the enemy, and I think often that can be the case, that, you know, it gets slower because you're tentative, right? We sort of hesitate, like, oh, where am I meant to go next? Oh, come on. Where's... So yeah, often flatting in a little bit of it can help. And the other reason I think it's good to sort of stick with flat color for a lot of sort of practice things, again, like even if you're really, you know, you want to sort of think about adding more rendering and stuff, is that, like, very often, if the drawing looks good with just flat color, sort of like this, then it's a really good indication that everything's kind of working, that the composition's working. So that can be a good thing to kind of start with, is just make sure that it kind of works at a flat stage. But I think what I'll do is I'll take a quick break, and we'll come back and we'll kind of keep going with this, keep adding some of this flat color, and we'll sort of see how good we can make it. I think I just need to charge this iPad. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. I've got this thing charged up. Now, it's good to step back. I guess at this point we've done a lot of the menial stuff, and now probably the choices we make now are going to be pretty critical, and it's good to just keep an eye on the basic theory, understanding what's going to work, etc. Now, part of the initial thumbnail here that we kind of had was this idea of there being some tonality at each corner that would help kind of give us some movement. So I think what I'm going to do is first add that, and then I'm just going to go through and really think about what I'm going to do with this whole thing. What's it going to look like? What's actually going to happen? So if we kind of select that color, right, what I'm kind of looking at is, you know, something like this. Let's make this a bit bigger. Let's make that a lot bigger. Now, this is not necessarily indicative of a final sort of treatment. I would probably want to sort of go in there and do some sort of brushiness with this. But this was the original idea. And I guess the question is like, does that work? Because I do feel like now that it's there, I kind of see the directionality going this way to be just as important. And I'm not sure that like adding stuff is actually gonna help in some kind of magical way. So again, what I probably tend to do is just, you know, like experiment, right? Like see what would work, you know, like maybe the idea that there's some sort of tree or something like that in the background might work. And again, this is an idea where, you know, I can kind of put that in. We can try it out, and then, you know, if that feels like it has a bit of possibility, you know, we could maybe go and do it with more sophistication, or whatever you want to call it. Make it less sketchy. But again, these are all things where, you know, I would encourage experimentation. It's not about right or wrong. But yeah, some of these little things might help make it feel a little bit more interesting, maybe. Hard to say. So I'll just basically, you know, leave that there. This is on its own layer. I can sort of turn it on and off. What I'm going to do now, and we could really work on these lines, right? Make them more sepia or something like that. But yeah, I'm just really going to focus on the basics here. What we're going to do is just think about, okay, like what color is this? I've got this alpha locked. Let's alpha lock that. Right? Pretty basic. And yeah, I guess the question is, what is the tonal scheme we're going to use? Now, I think, again, looking at it, that the general idea here is working pretty well, right? Like the general concept of just the shapes, I think works pretty well. The question is, like, what else is going to be like that color? And I do like the idea of playing with this. Yeah, this kind of slightly orangey color. But most of the things here are going to be low saturation. So I'm going to play with the contrast of light and dark more than anything else. And that's because I've sort of put that as a line in the sand, right? This is something that I've sort of identified as something that I want to stick to. And I think this is based on some good illustration theory. So I'm going to stick to my guns. I could probably make this a little bit, right? A little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. Right, I'm going to try and stick to my guns there. And we can also play with the idea of making the line darker. There's a couple of really simple ways to do that. But yeah, for now, just think about some really simple browns and grays. Right, now that is not quite going there, so let's take the alpha lock off. I'm pretty sure there's a keyboard shortcut for that. And yeah, I like the idea of these being this kind of orangey, browny color. Now, there'll be a bunch of ways we can make this a little bit more interesting than it is, but this is probably a good place to start. And also, I think probably starting with the hair. Yeah, let's see. Again, this is just playing around, right? So often, I think we need to just remember to play around. And in the beginning, this can be a little bit intimidating because, we're not quite sure what's happening or, what's going to work, what exactly is sort of going on. But a lot of experimentation and figuring out what's going to work with your style, what's not going to work with your style is just a matter of messing around, right? And just like thinking, okay, I've done this thing, right? Like what's next? Like what's the next thing I can sort of try? And I find colors a little bit like that. It's a little bit like going through and just solving problems one by one, right? Like what's the next thing that I sort of need to do? And I don't always have a good plan for how everything is going to, finally kind of turn out. It's just a matter of playing around and seeing like, well, what's next? Like what I don't know whether this is going to work yet. But often, especially with the line and color process, we don't really know whether it's going to work out until it's all said and done, right? Like so much of the success there is going to be based on, just does it all come together in the end? So you kind of have to take it one step at a time. One sort of choice at a time. I don't know about that. But yeah. Just kind of see what's happening. So I kind of have this idea in my head. And it's also one of these situations where we have a mix of like theory and implementation. So I have some ideas here for how I think this could work and what I'm sort of imagining. But then we obviously have to actually sort of do it, right? We actually have to see whether it works. Right, let's let's put this in here. Boom. So the idea is that's a bit transparent. We can kind of see through there. And I do want to have very sort of similar colors for a lot of these things. Boom. Like I like the idea of it being sort of one-ish color, right? Just her being kind of light against the background. But we obviously can't literally have it all be that one color because it won't work. So what I'm doing is just seeing if I can experiment and add a few of these colors here and there. But again, keep in mind that the goal here is just to have, like a finished version of a sketch, essentially. Something where we've got the drawing and we're just going to add a little bit to it. Boom. So yeah, need to figure out, right, let's think about maybe these guys are, right, more of that kind of orangey color. And I will obviously, play around with even just using flats, right? There's many ways we could add some extra dimensionality to these colors, and we'll certainly look at that as we go. But what I'm trying to do is just use a very simple tool, right? Which is, I've just got this one brush. What can I do? And I think a lot of good choices will come from kind of just thinking that way, just sort of saying, how can I modify the colors that are there? Let's not try and, just immediately jump to rendering. I think in the beginning of my artistic journey, I would be jumping to rendering, right? Things wouldn't be working and I'd be like, uh-oh, it's not working. I need to fix it. And I'd immediately just try and render as soon as possible. And that's where, sort of at this stage, I'd be going in there and, trying to render it basically. And I think what that tends to do is it focuses us on the technical aspects of this versus the narrative or story aspects of this. All right. So we just got these wings, right? That kind of are the major thing I think that needs to sort of be figured out. See if we can go up a little bit closer. See what it's looking like there. Yeah, so how do we define these wings? This is where it is worth, I think, playing with right, adding a layer on top and experimenting, playing around with it. So yeah, I kind of had this like in my mind. There was kind of like a bit of a gray, a little bit of a grayness to it. Let's reduce the opacity of this. See if that will kind of help us. Because again, the other thing we can kind of play with is pattern, obviously, right? Like sort of pattern on here. Now, there's probably a lot of good ways to separate or create interesting selections here. Right, so, we could easily just isolate certain parts of the wing, and therefore I wouldn't need to, go through and like erase some stuff in a sec, which is what I'm going to have to do. But sometimes if you're just working with a simple tool, it can make a big difference. Right, so I'm thinking about some like patterns, and these are super simple. Again, it's like, is that going to, is that going to be in any way, shape, or form reasonable? I'm literally just drawing, like thinking aloud, thinking on the page. Boom. Right. Is this gonna just be a giant mess? Is this gonna help us? Very, very hard to say. All right, let's try. All right, maybe filling in some of these things would help. So I've just got the same brush on a lower opacity. Right. And often again, like if you don't have a lot of different, like if the layers are hard, right? It's hard to kind of play around with this stuff on layers. It's a little bit easier to, right, just kind of try it out roughly. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Not sure. It may be all we have, though. So let's go to over here. You can kind of see this. Again, colors might look a little bit different, but this is still the basic idea. So yeah, there's a couple of things probably that are worthwhile, sort of separating out or thinking about. There's a couple of masks that would probably be good to have. And again, these are pretty simple things that we probably could just, figure out. So, if I kind of want a mask here, again, there's a number of ways we could kind of do this. Right, I kind of like to, right, if we just kind of keep it simple. Boom. Okay. So again, I don't know how that selection tool works in Procreate. That's super weird. But let's try invert. Let's try drop that in. That's kind of what we got. So yeah, let's just try paint it. Well, so yeah, what I'm trying to do is basically see if we can isolate this. And this is the problem if you don't do a proper set of flats beforehand. If you're kind of just, sort of doing a bit more painterly approach, then yeah, it's a lot harder because you don't have this to begin with. So let's clear that. And what we'll do is pick a brush. Where have we got airbrush, big soft brush? So yeah, we could certainly try and separate that, or we can just run some very sort of simple gradients to kind of like soften it, right? Because I think one of the problems is it's like a bit harsh. So again, just doing like a little bit of this kind of stuff, I think makes a big difference, right? I think this is often it's for me, it's often these little bits that will add that extra element of drama or sort of polish, right? It's just not having it look like, oh, it's just sort of a bunch of blobby stuff, right? Like now it's like a little bit more. You can see it's like there's a bit more there, and we can obviously go in and we can sort of reduce the opacity of that a little bit if we want. But yeah, still like pretty rough. Let's be honest. All right. But I think it sort of gives us maybe the sort of effect we need, which is that we can sort of see a bit of that see-throughness. We can see a bit of the wings. The wings are a little bit more sophisticated. Who knows? Let's see. So let's go back to kind of here. I think this is where we need to be. Oh, there we go. Wrong brush. Inking. There we go. And yeah, a big part of this is just going to be separating out some of these different objects so that everything doesn't feel exactly the same. Right. Because normally when you have different elements for something like let's go make a new one. Yeah, if you have like sort of different elements where something's kind of delineated in the line art, like there's a line between one thing and another, it's really useful to make sure that there is actual separation of that thing with the color. Right, if the lines are delineating things, then I think that the color should sort of follow. So if you kind of have, one thing here and it's obviously showing, where are we? Boom. Yeah, it's kind of showing that there's a separation, but then the color doesn't follow that. That's when it tends to feel as if it's not colored. Whereas if there's even very, very minor differences, then it'll make a huge difference. What have we got over? Yeah. Cool. All right. So let's do these bugs, because I feel like this is the next thing, and I want them to kind of have. Right, I want some of these areas to have a bit of a, right, to feel a bit darker. Right, like as if, you know, that they're not exactly 100% sort of orange, right? Because obviously bugs aren't orange. So I'm just gonna tone them down a bit. But then it's going to look a little bit rough. So trust me, I have some ideas for how we can kind of make it better. And again, might be good to, once I've kind of done that, again, you can see I'm being super rough. I often say I'm being super rough, but this is for reals, being super rough. All right. And the other thing I want to play with is like what tonality are these wings? Boom. Right. Boom. About these ones. So yeah, very blobby, but hopefully you can see how, you know, probably in the grand scheme of things, this isn't going to matter that much. And again, once we add a few more gradients and things, I think you'll start to see that, you know, it's going to be less and less important, because it's still looking a little bit flat, and we don't need to we don't need to do that much to it to make it look not flat, but I think there are some things that will help. Whoop. All right, let's play around with this. But I've got I've got that orange in there. So I'm going to get this slightly interesting effect here that all it is it's just going to make it feel as if it's not 100% flat, right? The goal is to make it feel as if there's something going on there. Oh, need to close that. So let's do alpha lock, right? Boom. There we go. So we can see basically just using this one brush. This is all that's going on. Now for these, what I might do is maybe for these legs, I will pick a slightly darker color. Right. But even that is probably, it's going to start to look a bit weird. Let's see. Right, got these legs, but trust me, I have a few tricks that we can sort of use to push this down. Because again, we could go in there and try and properly paint it, right? Like really go in and try and, you know, get the nuances of all these different things right. And I think that would be a great thing to do, but that would take a lot of time. And also use a lot of brain power. Whereas this is kind of a pretty simple way of getting a very, very similar result. And let's try this. Boom. right? Same thing as here. Okay. Because often the key is that the flatness has a lot of power. So we do want to preserve the flatness. And if we start rendering stuff, the question is going to be, well, why isn't everything else rendered, right? Like why just this? Like what's going on? So often I find the goal is to add as much complexity as possible without actually having to add a lot of stuff. And the way I often find that works, right? Let's clip and make a new one there. Oh, new one there. And let's use the soft brush. So what I'm going to try and do here is, like, over the top of all that stuff that I've done, we'll sort of push back some of that orange or some of that. Yeah, I think probably some of this orange. Let's make it go a little bit further. Yeah, we'll see. Again. All right, so everything is looking pretty sort of monotone, but I feel like overall we're sort of getting there. We need a few really basic things to happen, and a lot of that has to do with pretty simply figuring out some of the atmosphere and getting some big gradients there. So a lot of this is actually pretty close to being done. Got boom, yeah. Put a layer there, right? And we got that's the lines. Let's put a layer there. So here I've got this is the character. So like, how are we gonna, how are we going to make this work? Right, let's do like sort of big airbrush. Right, so one of the things I'm often going to try and do is, again, see if we can flatten it back a bit. Right. Now again, that's not exactly kind of what I want, but that might help us in some way, shape, or form. The other thing that I think is good to do is maybe, again, play with some of this tonality, right? So like, yes, maybe we're not, maybe we're not adding a lot of crazy swoosh marks or anything like that, but we just got a bit of stuff, and we can play that up later as well, like add some extra texture and kind of see how it works. Boom. What else we got? So I think like the other thing that often is going to be good is to just make sure we kind of separate out the character from the foreground a little bit, right? So thinking about some basic sort of atmosphere that could go in between them, and this is, this is pretty brutal, right? I'm doing. Where are we? Whoop. Soft brush. Yeah. Yeah, I think let's hit low opacity, massive airbrush again, just gonna pick out some of that. So the goal here is to just separate and make it feel less flat, right? It's still flat, but if I'm able to run some gradients over things, it's gonna make things feel a little bit less as if it's just purely literally flat color. All right. And here again we could play with these being sort of darker. Even though I spent a lot of time making them lighter, we could play with that. Yeah. I'm just messing around. Cool. All right. So the other thing to think about is looking at upping the color vibrancy, right? So we've got a lot of very boring flat color. How can we up the vibrancy? I mean, some good ways that I'm often playing with is, you know, if we look at changing this to a overlay, right? And let's go to brush. And let's pick some of these brighter colors, right? And see if like pushing a bit more vibrancy in those areas is going to help. And we've got like a pretty strong background, sort of foreground separation here. Right, but we could also like think about adding a bit more. So that, like, so I'm just adding a bit of this skin color to the background, right? So it just feels a little bit more connected. Now, again, still feels very flat, very sort of simple image, but you can kind of see that, like, it does kind of work. Like, it has a nice graphic nature. It's very sort of flat, but that's kind of what makes the image work to a certain degree. Yeah. So let's think about what other kind of brushes we could play with. So I think often the things that I'm often trying to do is just sort of general, right? Let's see if we can think about adding some of this to the background. Is just kind of adding some generalized texture. So that's at a pretty low opacity, but I could still do it at a higher opacity. So let's see if we can see some of that. Oh, that is harder. That is hard to see. Right, so everything's getting a little bit darker. The camera is having a harder time picking it up. Let's go over here and we can sort of see some of this happening. Right, this is probably the easiest way to see it. Right, so I'm just putting some super rough, sort of spotty texture in the background, and that's just gonna rough it up. Right, then I'm making it bigger. Right, let's make some of it darker. All right, play around with the size. And then let's pick some of these lighter colors, right? And do the same over here. So we're just adding a bit of stuff to the background, right? So it's not just sort of complete nothing. Boom. Yeah. So again, I'm literally just picking up random brushes and messing around, right? It's not doing anything, fancy. So we got that. Next thing we could also try, right? Because we got this, and we can see that is really like pulling a lot of focus from the face. Yeah, next thing we can do is the same, but in between these characters. Let's make a new one. And right now, probably don't need that much of this. But I feel like there is some good opportunity for this to kind of look a bit like fairy dust, right? Which is kind of cool. So let's see if we can. Let's see if we can play into that. Yeah. Well, so often if things are kind of working, or I'm like, oh yeah, that's sort of interesting, but you know, we really want to go further. I'm just going to make a bigger, like a new layer, right? Try some other things, right? That's probably a bit much. That airbrush way too big, right? Yeah. So again, it's easier to go overboard with that stuff. This is probably already sort of going overboard. But yeah, and then let's think about making a few. Right. So we can do the same kind of thing, but just right, much lower opacity. And all of these little bits and pieces are just going to, right? So if we sort of go back to this view, you can kind of see what I'm doing, right? Just trying to put in a few more bits and pieces. All right. So again, there's only so far we can kind of take that, right? And a lot of, you know, probably getting better at that stuff would be a matter of, right, just playing, like getting, you know, more brushes that are going to do a slightly better job of that. Yeah, I'm just messing around with it. So the other thing I will often sort of help just like soften some of these transitions is adding some noise or generalized texture. So I think I'll do that before I go and try and pull a bit more contrast out of everything. So we'll create a new layer. We will set it to overlay. We will then get a 50% gray, which is annoying. It's hard to get. Disk value. Oh yeah, here we go. Boom, 50. Right, let's. So we can add noise. Got my layer there. Let's go noise here. And yeah, figure out sort of how intense it should be. That's obviously way too much. Right, I think sort of scaling it up can be good. Right, just like a little bit. Yeah. And that We're just going to add a little bit of stuff. Now, another thing you can do that I feel like is sort of interesting is, right, like that's one noise layer. Another trick that can be good is we do another one. Right, let's make overlay. Then I do, overlay. And then let's do noise on that as well. Now let's going to add more noise. But for this one, what we're going to do is like sort of scale it up way more. Right? And this will often give like a, super noisy look. Boom. All right, we do not need that there. Right. So again, you can easily, right, sort of reduce the opacity of these. Right, that might be a bit much. But often that will just kind of like soften some of the messiness that's sort of here and there. Yeah, but again, we're pretty much kind of done, right? It's a very sort of simple image, right? No, it's graphic. No foreground, no middle ground, right? But yeah, let's see, because I do feel like we could just add a little bit more, because we're starting to get super dark. And so what I want to do is just sort of tweak the general look. Right, boom. What do we want here? So it's going to do nothing. It's going to make it too extreme. Again, just a little bit would be good. And then maybe, yeah, just play around with pulling some of this stuff out. Pulling some of this out so we get more focus there. Yeah, and then got this as well. So the question I have is like, is this, right? Is this helping? And this is where, yeah, you can kind of keep playing around with it. So if we copy canvas and we paste right at the top, then now it's going to be a little bit easier to run some adjustments on things, right? So now we can maybe do, right, hue, saturation, brightness, or color balance. Again, these will all do very, very similar things, but right, we could potentially just push the brightness up a little bit, make it a little bit more dramatic, right? So there's going to be the highlights, midtones. Again, it might be good to see if we can maybe just push them, yeah, a little bit towards the green might be good. And this is probably just going to sort of homogenize the colors a little bit, right? They were kind of very separated, and this will probably on the camera is looking like very sort of extreme. If we look at it here, it also looks kind of pretty extreme. Here we got the shadows, right? Let's see if we can push the shadows. Make them. So again, the key is that, need to remember that the goal is not to add a lot of color, right? So again, probably what I'll do after I've done this, right, like really sort of pushing it up. Because again, this is going to appear like sort of very, very sort of vibrant and blown out. Because one of the biggest challenges of working on an iPad is that it has quite good color gamut, right? So it kind of sort of looks pretty good on the iPad, but often if you're looking at it on something else, then the colors can change a little bit, just because the screen is sort of so good and you get sort of focused on it. But yeah, so I think that, right, if we sort of turn that on, turn that off, like I feel like that's giving us a little bit more color vibrancy. So other things we could do on top of that is, probably what I do is duplicate that, and then let's do another one. Let's get the saturation down a bit, because I actually want to, for most of it, right, be not quite so saturated. And then we could put a mask on that, right? And then, sort of pull out that color vibrancy for the main things that we want. Yeah. But again, it's such a flat image. I haven't added, sort of tone or anything like that. So it's very challenging to kind of push it further than that. But, it's just a little kind of thing. I think that's probably, all we should really do with it. Doing more than that is going to, probably start to, where the juice is not going to be worth the squeeze, so to speak. And I've already spent probably about an hour kind of just messing around with the color. So again, pretty long sort of demo again. But, you just refine your understanding of these things as you progress, and I'll sort of get better at developing the sort of workflow for the finishing a little bit more. But you probably don't need most of this stuff, right? If you kind of stick to just sort of what we got here, right? And even just making things, right? Let's sort of get it. See if we can get up a little bit closer. No, I think this one is a bit better. Yeah, so even if you just get rid of most of the extra sort of messing around and most of the extra, right, sort of atmosphere, right, even that one could probably go down a little bit. Boom. Yeah, so you can basically just keep it very flat and it'll still work really well. Yeah, and you can add a little bit more, and then, you come back to it the next day, right? We kind of like push and pull some of this around, right? Figure out exactly which one kind of works best. Yeah, and just mess around with it. But yeah, this is the basic idea. Do a drawing, add some flat color, mess around, and all we're doing is really sort of elevating that drawing, right? That is, I guess, the key to this sort of process and, doing this kind of stuff. It's not necessarily about creating some amazing illustration. We do need to plan illustrations, but if you can try kind of just get used to taking your drawings, adding color, like seeing what happens, experiment. You're building, I think, one of the most important muscles with art, which is your ability to just kind of mess around and see what happens and experiment and kind of think, what's wrong with this image, right? Does it need more of this? Does it need more of that? Does it need more color? Does it need more, like, what does it need more of? How do I sort of get more of it? Again, there's like a huge number of ways we could, I guess, make this more interesting. Could play with making the lines a bit thicker, etc., etc. But yeah, anyway, that's it for now on this one. Let me know what you thought of this one. A little bit of me sort of messing around in Procreate. But again, I think that's often how this is done, and that's also something I want to share with you, is that, I've been doing this for ages, and this is like a new software program that, I don't use all day, every day to the same degree I use Photoshop. And yeah, you just mess around, and I do this in Photoshop as well if you see me do these tutorials. And that's kind of part of the process, right? It's really important, as I said, to build that muscle for just kind of playing around with layers, sitting back, sliding sliders, and just checking that final sort of read, right? It's the same thing if you're painting traditionally. We step back from the work, take a break, you come back to it. That allows you to kind of see it fresh. And I think just, again, there is a lot of benefit you'll get from planning an image, but also just kind of messing around and seeing what you can do with little sketches and other things you kind of create can be super useful too. Anyway, that's all I got for this one. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments down below, and we'll catch you around. Happy drawing.